So welcome to the first contributors meeting. This is about OpenFaaS, which is being built basically by you guys. And I just had a few ideas and things I wanted to share with you, some of the direction I have in mind for the project. And then I wanted to go around and get an idea of what people are working on, what you want to work on next. So OpenFaaS is kind of on the road at the moment. We had the cloud native serverless work group meeting recently, and a number of you came to that. Then was in London for the cloud native meetup. About 220 people signed up for that, and Richard came along as well. Had some really good feedback. And then I was in LA last week for the Open Source Summit, and I'll speak a little bit about some of the conversations I had there, and I think some of the focus of what I think is important for the project going forward. Also had a chance at the last minute to present in Docker's Moby Summit, which is normally just for Docker's own projects. So they invited, after seeing a demo of OpenFaaS in the expo area, to have me in and give a demo there, and then have a bird for feather session, which is where people sit down with you and you talk about serverless and they actually try out the code. So that was actually really good. The next event, if I can get Ryanair to reschedule my flight, will be in Milan on Thursday next week. And there's a big event there, and they've got the kind of names like Microsoft, Google, Amazon there presenting about cloud. And I was asked to come and speak about what you could run on premise, which will be OpenFaaS. And then we have DockerCon EU, and with any luck, I'll have the chance to be in the Moby Summit for that again. So it was really good exposure. And potentially it's KubeCon, so I've actually submitted a paper there. Now, you guys have opportunity to take OpenFaaS on the road yourselves. And so I think this is one of the ways we're going to start getting more and more adoption and awareness about the project. So the first way you could do that is at work. Now, I've had a couple of opportunities where I thought, well, actually, we could try using OpenFaaS for that. And people have been like, yeah, it sounds interesting. And I've sowed the seed. And actually, one of those conversations from 3 months ago is happening now. And somebody's sat down with them today, and they were using the FaaS CLI on Windows, and they were creating functions already. Richard told me about a conversation he had at work a while ago, and that's now become fruitful. So I think any exposure we can get where we're actually quite close to the people is going to help in terms of us being able to get that feedback and understand what we need to do. So you're all free to go and talk about OpenFaaS at local meetup groups, and obviously you can get this slide deck. Maybe we'll cut a template of it, and you can go, and you're absolutely fine to use this. You can even submit a CFP to a conference, and I'm happy to help you with that. CFP means call for papers, and you just write a little abstract about the talk you're going to do, and you'd be surprised. You don't necessarily have to feel like you're an expert or that you know it inside and out. A lot of you are here because you got a good knowledge of OpenFaaS and you're doing stuff with it already. So if any of you are interested, get in touch. And if some of you are on podcasts already, or maybe you've thought about starting one, that's another way of doing it. And then there's kind of like that water cooler conversation. So you can kind of walk around, and if you think there's a chance to talk about it, why not? So I had one ask. With the amount of people that have joined our social media channels at the moment, it's really hard to know who is who. So my ask is to be memorable. And the way I'd suggest you might want to do that, and some people have already been doing this, is to sync up your social media handles. So they're either all the same or all really similar, or they actually have your name in it. Now, obviously, you can do whatever you like, and if that doesn't work for you, that's fine. It's just going to help other people remember your name and be able to tag you in comments and be able to promote stuff. So this is just really a kind of housekeeping thing, but I think it will also help with people getting to know who you are. So like I said at the beginning, OpenFaaS is being built by EU. And this is a slide that I've been taking around to Cloud Native London, Moby Summit and other places, and just showing, look, these are the people that are building this. We also have some of the influencers on the diagram. There's people from Docker's engineering team, there's Jacob at Packet, and these are people that have really helped with direction. And I know that you guys can help in so many ways, whether that is feedback, testing, helping for documentation. It's not just about being a Golang expert. That's a very small part of it. Now, on the right-hand side, I've got this blue box with some of the people that have really contributed the most, whether it's code or just support and help, and also have my wife there. One, because it makes it look a bit more diverse, and also because she has actually been helping me free up to go and do admin on GitHub and stuff like that. So I want to see this get bigger, and one of the ways the project is measured, as I found out from Dan Cohn at the Linux Foundation, CNCF, is by the contributions that the project has. Now, we have 3 or 4 different repos, and a lot of our contributions are spread out. So one of the ways we can get a tick in a box and a public visibility is to start having people make contributions to what's most public, which is the main FaaS repo. So if you've got fixes for documentation, you're writing guides, or you want to try adding some unit tests, if you can find a way to make some contributions to the FaaS repo, I think that will just help people see what you are doing across the board. And I know a lot of you have spent time helping the CLI, and the CLI has actually come from something that was completely functional to something really special. And I'm really proud that we've been able to put that together. And I was telling Ian down there to go and have a look at it, because one of the things he's doing is playing with OpenFaaS on Azure. And I was like, well, FaaS is more than just the engine, it's the CLI as well. And the reason that I like that so much is because the community has had so much involvement in it. So I added a note to the GitHub documentation, and it says, how do I become a maintainer? Well, right now, I guess there are a few people that are probably kind of helping in that way. But in terms of being able to make right changes to the repos, we have Derek, who you've probably already come across. And he's basically a serverless function written in Golang. And he checks for developer sign-off. He can assign issues to people. He can manage labels. He can open and close them. And potentially could start to do other stuff like merging PRs. So right now, anyone who's in a maintainer's file, when they talk to Derek, he responds to them. So if you think you'd like to help out with that, with helping with any of these things, reach out to me and we'll see if we can get you into that. I also want to thank John for extending the functionality of Derek. So it's great to see that that is actually something that that's kind of organic in itself. When I showed Patrick at Docker, who heads up the evangelism, he was really impressed with Derek, and he wanted to know how they could use it on the Moby organization to start managing some of the many projects that they have there. So that's definitely a kudos to us. So this is a new thing, and I just wanted to share, I think, some of what has been going on as this project has evolved, what the goals I have personally for the project, and I hope you can get behind too. So really, this project isn't about sitting in like the background and doing cool stuff. The point of this project is to gain a viral mind share, and talked a little bit about how we could start to do that. So I want people to start using this project and wanting to use it, not necessarily knowing why. I think that's a real sign of something becoming viral, is that people want to know about it. They come up to you, and many people did at LinuxCon, and they said things like, wow, that project's really taking off, or I heard about OpenFaaS here the other day, or heard about it there. Or they look at the star count. So one of the things Dan at the CNCF said is if a project's to be considered by them, it needs 250 stars. So I was able to say, well, how's 5,500 for you, right? And I'm not happy with that. I want to see that double, and I want to really show that we're creating something special here, and that it's a group effort. And I think we can all agree that the more mind share we have of our project, the more chance of success it has. Okay, so this project is about empowered serverless. It's not about getting people to use cloud functions necessarily. So if you look at the Serverless Inc. project, a lot of what they do is find ways to make it easier for you to work with Lambda or with Google Cloud Functions. This is about being able to run it on your laptop, being able to run it on your own cluster, being able to launch it on ACS like Ian is doing. And so it's about bringing the power back to you. And one of the things that Pete at Nats Streaming said to me is he loved the composability of the project. In fact, it's got those Unix principles of system building. If you want asynchronicity, you can have it. If you want Nomad as a backend, that's fine. You can build it. Now, here's a big thing that I think could be a way of helping this project being successful, which is to get it to a point where it can be donated to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Now, if the project's submitted there, it gets, not only does that help with the mind share and empowering people, but it's like a rubber stamp that shows that this is a project that's doing things the right way. Now, there's 3 other projects that I think are likely to get submitted, which would be Kubeless, Fission, and OpenWhisk. And at the moment, they're all on the landscape diagram and we're not. Now, the landscape diagram is getting recut in 2 weeks, and I've been told that we'll be on it in the next cut. But what Dan said was, ideally, we don't want to end up being on the program and the CNCF as an incubated project along with 5 other ones that are doing pretty much the same thing. So his advice was to start to stress and make it clear what we're doing different, right? And what's driving the project, both at a technical level and at any other level that makes sense. So I know there's more and more people joining the project, and we're all working really hard and in whatever way we can. But at some point, if we want to make it really successful, it will benefit us if we can find some kind of corporate sponsorship for it. I don't know if this is something that we'll actually go down the route of, but a couple of ways that could look is people might be able to give us developer resource because they want an integration for their platform. So some of the work Nick is doing at HashiCorp, they're spending and spinning hours up doing a Nomad integration, but at the same time, they're looking to enhance and update the main FaaS code base. There may be someone that wants to hire some of us to come and make this a leading kind of serverless platform alongside their other products. I don't know. But this is kind of, if you think about the broad brush level, this is probably where this project needs to go. Right. So on a kind of lighter note, we do have swag, and talking about the mindshare, get it out there, stick it on your laptop. Here's 3 of the Docker, well, 1 Docker staff, 2 Docker captains. And this is a great kind of photo just to show that people are using and interested in the project. We also have like a postcard. So if you need to have that made up, what it does is on the back side, it says something like serverless on your terms, and it lists the main points of why you might want to check out the project. So there's 2, what I'm going to say is I think there's 2 official designs for the swag. And if we're going to have any made up, I think we should stick to these 2. I'm happy to take other suggestions. The first one is 1 by 4 inches, and you've seen it as a magnet, but it prints out quite well as a sticker. The other one is the round one, which is 2.5 by 2.5 inches. And I think there was a promotion recently to get them done at 3 inches, which is actually like really big. I did order some, but I think 2 by 2.5 by 2.5 is quite a nice standard size. And at the moment, I don't have any funding or sponsorship to send you a pack. I'd love to do that, but if you're interested, Sticker Mule often have deals on, and there's a link at the bottom that you can use as a referral link. If we're able to build up some referral credit, we might be able to get some more packs sent out. Okay. If you have any other ideas for swag, let me know. And again, one of the things that happened was people came up to me and said, well, your project has swag. That means it's a proper project. And so that's the kind of elevation that we want, is for people to start taking it more seriously through this social proof and through what we're doing. Okay, so we need to make this look like a thing, and I think that's what we're starting to do. So the driving factors of OpenFaaS are to focus on ease of use. I was explaining to Ian earlier how the reason why we don't have a load balancer or an ingress controller set up in the default configuration for Kubernetes is because we want to get to something in 60 seconds anyway on any laptop. We then have additional guides that might help people get to where they need to be. We've got the CLI that has been really important in improving the user experience. This is portable, so when I published the blog on using with a Raspberry Pi, I had 36,000 page views in 24 hours. And I think that's where a lot of our recent stars came from. And that's the kind of thing we should be thinking about, is how can we help people relate to this in a way that makes them want to know more about it. Again, there's a simplicity. So I had some time to speak to the author of Kubeless, which is another framework. And basically, he told me that they're having a lot of trouble scaling their workloads. So rather than building a Docker image up front like we do, they wait until the JavaScript gets inside their framework, and then they set about building images on the fly. And they do it for every function as it's deployed, which means that when they scale, they then have to do it again and again and again. OpenWhisk has a very elaborate architecture. And the way they approach the problem is they say, right, we won't use Kubernetes at all. We'll use runc directly. So they are having to almost implement their own orchestration layer. Now, one of the things Kubeless is getting points for is for being Kubernetes native, because it uses what's called a custom resource definition, which is an API object. And so rather than having a microservice, they just write a piece of code and deploy it, and then it does the changes in the cluster. But really, that's no more native than it is just to use a pod or a deployment. It's exactly the same. Okay, but what might help us is to think about, could we create something and place it there so that really when people look at ours, they can say, well, yeah, that's the same as Kubeless. They don't have anything on this project. And so it's kind of positioning ourselves to the people that are looking in. And then it's open, right? So we have a NAT streaming queuing implementation. I think we should look at some point, a Kafka one, especially if we can get it outsourced. So if we can make some connections with Kafka people and see if they want to write an implementation, I think that will help the project be taken more seriously too. So the Kubernetes support, I think, was the right thing to do strategically. And I'm seeing more and more that this is something we need to focus on and spend time in. When Ian got in touch, he said, look, the only reason we're looking at your project is because of the Kubernetes support. There's no other reason. So I think Docker Swarm serves us really well because it allows us to get up an environment really fast and to work on all of the front-facing tools, the gateway, the CLI, and the functions. But really, when it comes to positioning the project, I think we really need to start thinking about some kind of phrase like, like winning with Kubernetes. We need Kubernetes to be the thing that actually helps us get that mind share. The Hyper and the Nomad integrations are also important for visibility and for social proof to show that actually we've got big people interested in the project, right? So I just wanted to mention quickly about the synchronous invocation, because I don't know how well people know this. But if you imagine you had an image to resize and you called into the gateway with it, what we do is we send the bytes into your function and we get a response back immediately, which is a smaller picture and an error code, like 200 or 500. When it comes to asynchronous processing, things are a bit trickier. And most of the time, I think we should direct people towards synchronous processing and keep the async really as a way of saying that we do it without necessarily pushing people to it. We need to spend more time testing it, and it also adds additional complexities. So when you look at this example, I'm passing an image in, it gets put on a queue, later on it's taken off the queue, and we just call the function like we would do normally. So the problem there is what happens if that breaks, right? So we have to retry the work. If that was something like checking into a website to say that you've arrived somewhere, you might end up actually doing it 3 times, for instance, and that could not be what you want. Getting the result out is more complicated than it looks. I've added this callback URL, which means that you can actually have those bytes posted back to a site. But even managing that is really hard, okay, because it means you need to set up a website that's publicly accessible for those bytes to come in. Yeah. Now, one thing you could do is you could have your function run asynchronously and then call another function with the result. I think that might be a good pattern. But the more and more people start looking at asynchronous invocation, the more we need to build a story about it. We need to start blogging and talking about basic use cases. So this screen has just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I've now put it onto one screen. So this is people that are either providing a backend, are integrating with OpenFaaS, or their users. So I think I've already spoken about how CodeFresh are evaluating OpenFaaS to build their next set of services. They basically deploy Kubernetes for other people. ADP has 2 use cases at the moment, and then we had one of our architects go off and speak about it at Docker New York. More recently, Pivotal got in touch, and they've started to tell me about a system they're building. And one person got OpenFaaS working on Garden and Cloud Foundry, and someone else got it working on something they're calling Bosch, which is their version of Kubernetes. Okay. The Rancher support is coming on. I actually met up with one of the Rancher developers while I was in LinuxCon and sat with him for a couple of hours, and he took Ken's contribution and actually published it to their catalog. So if you are on Rancher, you can literally just find OpenFaaS and deploy it. The Kong integration at the moment looks even simpler than we thought, and that's just a case of running in a couple of services and commands, and you can benefit from OAuth, rate limiting, and whatever else you need. Austin has been doing some great work on the serverless integration. I'm not sure how much time and energy we should spend on that, but we need to keep it moving forward and make sure we're doing it the right way. And it could be an interesting experiment. The one thing that I don't see happening is that replacing RCLI. So I think we need to make RCLI stand out and have a good user experience. Now, the serverless framework CLI is just geared to deploying on the cloud, so they don't really have that concept of building locally. So I think that there might be some friction as we try to do that. Okay. Hyper have been contributing to their backend every week, and that's coming on. It's still early days, but it is functional. And again, it's more social proof. So they're sending me some stickers for the Milan event, and I think they're going to print some OpenFaaS ones as well. All right. And if you want to ask me about any of the logos on here later, that's fine. So really, we just wanted to talk about the big ticket items that I see coming forward. Now, if these were to be broken down into different categories, when we look at Kubernetes, I think one thing that Gabe Monroy came out to speak to me from Microsoft, he said, how are you doing versioning? How would you do a canary deployment? And the reason he asked me that is because he's thinking about how would I use this in production? And even when I started to apply changes that John had made to Derek, I just redeployed the function. I ended up breaking it. And I was like, oh, I hope nobody raised a pull request before I can switch it back. And we don't want our users to have that same experience. So I think we need to build a story around this so that they can look at OpenFaaS and they can be like, well, yeah, I'm going to use a canary deployment for Derek. And I'm going to switch over to the new URL. And if it's all good, I'm going to mark it and then it will switch over. Something along those lines. Okay. Now we might have a versioning strategy already through Docker images. So again, that's something that we can potentially take advantage of that a project like Kubeless can't, where they're building Docker images on the fly. I think if we were to create an API object that sits inside Kubernetes, regardless of what it does, I think that will win us some points with the Kubernetes community. And then Kubernetes connectors that with barely any work allow you to deploy our existing Kubernetes code onto a cloud. So that might be like what's being done with Azure Container Service. That's something else we could think about. I've had a number of people speak to me about timers and scheduling. That's something that I've always kind of been pushing down. There's a number of ways we can do that without changing the project, like using Jenkins. Okay, but it might be time for us to start thinking about, is this a solved problem? Is this something that we can already use so that we can start doing a job once per day, for instance? I spoke to a couple of prospective users in the Mobi Summit, and they were looking at it and they said, well, look, we want to run an Elasticsearch cleanup once per day and it times out on Lambda after 5 minutes. So we'd rather use your project instead. Can you do like scheduled tasks? So I think this might be something we can look at. In terms of the mind share and gaining there, I think blogging is going to be important, whether that is on your own blog or you set up a Medium account just to write up a quick post. I have some channels that I can share through, including Docker Weekly, if it mentions Docker enough, through my own channels, and then posting onto Hacker News and Reddit are some of the most successful ways of doing that. If you're going to tweet, a GIF always helps, I think, some kind of animation, because it makes you want to see what's happening, especially appeals to people like me who love coding, want to see what's on that box. We need to kind of get that star count up to 10K. 5K's made a mark, and I think now we just need to keep growing on that and pushing it. I think it's possible to get to that by the end of the year, but it's only if you guys can pitch in with the mind share and really help push things forward. The feedback I had from Dan said compared to other projects, and I said, well, look, I don't want to compare to other projects. I'd rather be nice, and I'd rather not have to go and figure out how they work so that I can compare them. He said, no, you need to compare. So I've given you some overview, and maybe we could each kind of have a look at what's out there and start to think about how OpenFaaS is different and what sets it apart. Okay. We talked a bit about security, and I think Kong can basically come in and sit in front of the API gateway and do everything anyone could want. So OAuth tokens means that you have an API token for any function. Basic authentication is where you could cover the whole API gateway in one shot. So you come to the UI and it asks you for a password. And then TLS is always going to be important because that gives you encryption. So that's where you set up a Let's Encrypt certificate. And I believe you can use Kong for that too. Okay. Now, some people have seen that Afterburn work that I've been doing. Again, that's something that allows us to say OpenFaaS is fast and it has high throughput. But with that comes some complexity and some additional work. So as much as possible, let's just have people run stuff the normal way. And as Dave Douglas from IBM said, who's been working on OpenWhisk, he said, people come and they're running something that's going to take 3 seconds anyway. So why do we care about another 50 milliseconds? Okay. And so in the main, I think we need to push people down the happy path, which is use your Kong for your security, just run your code as it's developed. Don't worry about the Afterburn, and get to something that's working fast so they can get to experience it. Okay. So if we zoom in, these are the things I think that we need to look at first. Okay, and I'll share this with you later. And I believe that is the end of the that's the end of the presentation I had for you. So let's take some questions on it. And I know a few more people have joined.
Can we see the next to last slide again?
Yeah, sure. Let me go back to it. Am I still sharing?
Yeah.
There you go.
So the Canary rolling updates, like, do you see that as being sort of functionality that gets pushed into the gateway? Sort of have it see push out a new version, have it bleed off transactions to old sort of containers you have running, and anything new you spin up new containers, or do you see?
I don't know the implementation detail on it yet, but I know that a rolling update is something that we don't do. So at the moment we just drop the container and recreate it. So we can get a really quick win by creating an update endpoint and having an update CLI command. So that could be enough to kind of make people happy. In terms of like how you could do a canary or rolling update, to any more degree, I think we need to dig in and look at what Kubernetes does, maybe what Docker Swarm has, and then it could be optional whether other backends support it or not.
I guess from an end user point of view, you only have two behaviors: one where you handle the upgrade gracefully, and the other where